We all know, folks, that nothing will ever replace the top 25 that actually makes sense in the hearts and minds of college football fans. We know that that is a long-standing tradition that cannot be replaced in any such way. However, over the past several seasons, as soon as the regular season and the postseason conclude, we have compiled our 1 through 133 rankings. These are team rankings, not to be confused with program rankings, which we will get to in a few months, and to separate the two by a nice distance of time because that has caused some confusion in the past. Last year, we separated the team rankings and the program rankings, and that seemed to work out rather well last season. Welcome in, everyone, to the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you all stopping by. I'm not necessarily at my best at 10 o'clock in the morning, but we will do our best and we will deliver and we will have some fun with rankings for 2023. So this is not a projection toward 2024. This is also not a analysis per se of who I believe are the top 133, 1 through 133, based on just who I believe are the best teams. They're number one, they're number two, they're number three, etc. on down the line. This is a resume ranking, so keeping in with the top 25 that actually makes sense. Now, I will have to admit early on to one little snag in the system. So we will discover it at some point. It's going to be kind of like, where's Waldo? You ever make a list, some extensive list, not a list of 4 or 11, but a list of 147 items or something like that, or 133. And you were like, why do I have 132? And I can't find the other one. I cannot find what the other one. And then you go back to your list that you're referencing and you're like, I've got all of them. And you cross-reference and you've got all of them. Or you've got 134 and you're like, why do I have 134? Well, I've got to have somebody in there twice. Over the last day or so, that's been a series that has been a back and forth. I've had 134. Okay, there's somebody in there twice, and that I got to comb through and find. Well, that's not that difficult. But when you got 132, and then you keep combing through and saying, who am I missing? And then you cross-reference with the standings in college football. I've got them all there. Why is it not adding up to 133? It's at 132. Then you go through all the numbers. I've gone through all the number 1, 2. So I had all this figured out sometime earlier. Got it all set. Got my rankings. They're all set. They're pristine. Well, they're not pristine. I will get to that in just a second. But they're all lined up. They're all ready to go. And I was building graphics just minutes prior. The reason I'm 2 or 3 minutes late is I was building the graphics for the banners right up until the time that we came on live. And I hit about number 35, and I'm like, they're at 35. And they're also at 32. Uh-oh, I got Duke. Now, who's not going to include Duke twice? So the error that I made, anybody's going to make that error. We're all thinking about Duke football all the time. So I just ranked Duke twice. So I'm like, well, then somebody else is missing because I got 133 in here. But I didn't have time to figure out who that would be. So where's Waldo? So you can help me out over the next couple hours to figure out who did I leave out, and then we'll rank them. Appreciate you all being here at the Voice of College Football. We've got a busy day as always. So don't know if this is going to be a regular thing. I've done this 2 consecutive days, jumped on at 10 a.m. Eastern time. We did a Michigan Live special edition yesterday, and we are looking for a spot to do an SEC show, weekly SEC show. So we'll figure out when we can fit that in. All right, let's get to the 1 through 133 that actually makes sense. One caveat here. It's not quite as detailed as the 25 that I go with each and every week. That top 25 that actually makes sense, I can guarantee at about a 97.4% clip that I have reviewed and made sure that that's exactly what I want. There's probably been one time, maybe twice in 6 or 7 years that somebody has said, Mark, look at that. And I've been like, yeah. But with this list, I got to say, I probably spent 5 hours on this list, and it needs about 10 or 15 hours to truly get it where I would want it in regards to the metrics of the wins and losses and the resume. But I went through and I combed through and I combed through it again. I combed through it again. And then I started lining up, and certainly within conferences, wanted to make sure that those made sense. Those groups of conference teams made sense, and went through the whole deal. So less than scientific, however, should make sense. About 98% of it, or about 132 out of 133, because we've got 132 teams instead of 133. So somebody's missing. We'll find out who that is. All right, let's see who's in the chat before we get rolling. Joey's here. Joey always has a word of wisdom for everyone, and today it's smash the like button. We would appreciate if you would at least do that for us. John's here. Good to see everyone. Well, Joey's asking if West Virginia made it in the poll. Number one, it's not a poll. Number two, everybody made it. Everybody but one team at this point made it. So, and no, Michigan fans, I did not forget Michigan. They were tough to forget this year. So they're in the rankings. They're in the rankings. But make no mistake about it, this is not a poll. Thank you, Joey. Yes, we're at Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App, Mark Rogers TV. Those links, for at least the links that are able to be linked, are in the description section of every video. Dave's here. Who's number one? Who's number one? Who's number one? Maybe Florida State. Maybe you toss out 63-3. Say, Florida State didn't show up for that game. They were 13-0. I like their schedule better than Michigan's. Maybe Florida State's number one. There you go. All right, we will get to it. Here we go. $132 banners. So did it really have to be my alma mater? My alma mater is the worst football team in the country. And it's not like they are infrequently the worst team in the country. They're just flat out the worst team in the country. And actually, as a tandem, you've got, this is the wagon wheel rivalry that made up a spot in my bottom 10 a number of times this season, because Kent and Akron are both awful. Combined, they got outscored by about 400 points. They defeated nobody inside the MAC. They defeated no other FBS teams. Kent beat an FCS team. Akron beat an FCS team. And then, of course, they played. So that produced the only win between them in the MAC. Otherwise, 0-15 in the MAC. So Kent's at 133. Akron's at 132. Yes, there they are. The pride of the Akron metropolitan area. And we do have Kent State represented right there as 133. Let's see some of Kent's more embarrassing losses. They lost to UCF by 50. They lost to Fresno State by 43. They only lost to Northern Illinois by 10. That was their closest game other than the Akron game. So they did not get to within double digits, single digits of anyone. Akron they lost to Temple by a field goal. They lost 2 overtime games. And Indiana, if this is not embarrassing, Akron took Indiana to overtime. And if they would have made a field goal, they would have won that game. So that's how bad Indiana's been at times this year. We will see where they will rank. So the MAC pulls off the trifecta with number 131. Oh, I think I already... No, I did not. Buffalo. Buffalo won 3 games, and they beat Akron and they beat Kent. So they were a fairly easy selection. Despite having all 3 wins in conference play, they were fairly easy for a number 131 slot because 2 out of their 3 wins were against the 2 most inept teams in the country. So the Buffalo Bulls at 3-9 are 131. All right. Then we've got, this is the school that shows up in the bottom 5 constantly. They are a mainstay, much like Kent, even more than Kent. They are a mainstay in this position. And it's the Minutemen of UMass. They did beat New Mexico State. They did beat Army. But, man, they lost to Penn State by 63, Liberty by 24. They lost to Auburn by 45. The other games they lost by 15, 20 points. And they lost to New Mexico State, again, in overtime. So there you go. UMass at number 130. As we keep it moving down the list. And hopefully we're going to find our missing link. We've got UConn under Jim Mora at number 129. And UConn, of course, they didn't even play football in 2020. They had a horrendous program, horrendous team. Jim Mora steps on campus. Bam. He lifts them to a bowl game in 2022. But they took a definite step back here. They beat Rice by a touchdown. That's their big win of the season. They lost to Tennessee by 56, James Madison by 38. And they lost a couple games by 1 point. So they lost to Duke by 34. So there you got the mighty Huskies of UConn at 129. At number 128, we've got Louisiana Monroe. They went 0-4 in the Sun Belt Conference. They beat Army. So we've got Army losing to 2 of the worst teams in the country, UMass and Louisiana Monroe. And as soon as I saw that and I checked out, I went to Army and I thought, okay, we really need to look at this Army schedule, because if they lost to 2 of the worst teams in the country, even though they went 6-6. And so we did a tweak on Army there. So Louisiana Monroe, their big win. Army, they lost to Texas A&M by 44 and Ole Miss by 32. Those were the 2 big teams they played. They got within 1 point, and this is one of the reasons I elevated them past a couple 3-win teams, or 3 3-win teams, is they played a couple good football teams, App State and Texas State, within 1 point. So Louisiana Monroe at 128. 127, we've got Nevada. They went 2-10. They've been horrible for a few years now, ever since Carson Strong moved on to the NFL. 2-10, did get a win against San Diego State, which is usually really good, but not this year. And so the Wolfpack are there at 2-10. Their biggest loss in regards to a point spread, they lost to USC by 52 and Wyoming by 36. All right, we come in at 126 with East Carolina. And they had a bounce-back season the year before, but back down in the dumps at 2-10. Their wins against Gardner-Webb and FAU. They did not really get blown out. Michigan beat them by 27. Shoot, Michigan beats most of the teams in the Big Ten by 27. So other than that, East Carolina stayed within a touchdown of a lot of teams. Tulsa, Rice, Charlotte, Tulane stay within a field goal of Tulane. So East Carolina, terrible record at 126, but they played some decent football. Next up, we got Sam Houston. They beat Kennesaw State, Louisiana Tech, and Middle Tennessee. They also were close. 3-9. They lost overtime games to Jacksonville State and FIU. They lost to Western Kentucky by 5. Liberty only beat them by 5. Air Force, good football team, only beat them by 10. They stayed within a couple touchdowns of BYU. So Sam Houston competed. They're 3-9, number 125. At 124, we've got Temple, 3-9 football team out of the American. Their wins: Akron, Norfolk State, Navy. They got blown out by Miami by 34. SMU beat them 55-0. But they hung with some other decent teams. Let me try to find those. Maybe they didn't. They played at least within 2 to 3 scores of some decent teams. Memphis, Texas, San Antonio, those teams. The Owls of Temple at 124. Let's stay in that 3-9 range with Charlotte. And Charlotte, they defeated East Carolina by 3, beat Tulsa in overtime, and beat South Carolina State. Let's see, any big blowout losses for Charlotte. They stayed within 18 of Maryland, led in the second half. Their big blowout loss was against South Florida, and their most impressive loss was taking Memphis to overtime. So Charlotte at 123. And because I've got this one slot issue, I keep looking at this list here versus our listings here. And the banners that you see should be accurate, but at some point, we're missing a team. All right, Southern Miss, 3-9. Beat Louisiana in overtime, beat Louisiana Monroe. So Alcorn State as well. They're located, I believe, in the state of Mississippi. Yes, Alcorn State, of course, Steve McNair. So I was going to say that they were beating up on, they were good within the state of Mississippi and Louisiana, but otherwise, they lost to Florida State by 53. They lost to South Alabama by 52. But they stayed within a touchdown of Arkansas State, a bowl team. Old Dominion, 6-6 team. And so there you got Southern Miss at 3-9. On to the Mountain West, makes its first appearance with New Mexico at 4-8. The Lobos, they beat UMass in overtime. That tells you a lot right there. They defeated Hawaii by 3 touchdowns. Fresno State by 8, so there's a nice win. Fresno State, a good football team. So that was their nice win. New Mexico lost to Texas A&M by 42. They lost to Boise by 28. UNLV defeated them by 42 points. But they did take Utah State to overtime. So there we've got New Mexico. Played some decent football. Stayed in games against Wyoming in particular and New Mexico State. So there we got the Lobos at 4-8, number 121. All right, moving up to the Miners of UTEP at number 120. All right, they defeated Incarnate Word, FIU, and Sam Houston. And really nobody embarrassed them. They've got no truly embarrassing losses. They did lose to Northwestern by 31. Stayed within 3 touchdowns of Arizona. Lost a string of 1-score games against Middle Tennessee and Western Kentucky. And I guess those are the 2 right there. 14-point loss to Liberty. A New Year's 16 of sorts. Not truly a New Year's 16. All right, at number 120, we've got UTEP. And again, the exercise, if you're just joining us, is where's Waldo? We've got a missing team somewhere. All right. At 119, we've got Florida International. Yes, there they are. FIU defeated Maine, North Texas, UConn, and Sam Houston in overtime. Their most lopsided loss was against Middle Tennessee, 34, Liberty, 32. And so there you go, FIU at 4-8. Let's move it up to Louisiana Tech. Nope. This is where we could have the issue right here. Maybe I just put Louisiana there. That should be Louisiana Tech. The Bulldogs, 3-9, 2-6, beat FIU beat Northwestern State, beat UTEP. And man, they stayed within a touchdown of Western Kentucky, Middle Tennessee, North Texas, New Mexico State, beat them by a field goal. That's it. So Louisiana Tech had some competitive games, but it all came out to 3-9. And that's about where in the rankings we are here. A lot of 3-9 teams. There's FAU at 4-8. They beat Charlotte, South Florida by 42, Tulsa, and Monmouth. They had a close game against Ohio U and Illinois and UAB and Rice. FAU at number 117 with Tom Herman, of course, on the sideline. At number 116, we've got UAB, the Blazers, usually better than this. Beat Temple, FAU, South Florida, North Carolina A&T. Stayed within a touchdown of North Texas, and that's it. Georgia beat them by 28. Everybody else beat them by multiple scores, including Memphis by 24. You got UAB, the Blazers, usually better. Not this year, 1-16 or 116 in the rankings, 4-8. There's the Mean Green. The Mean Green, North Texas, they've been better, of course, with Seth Luttrell as head coach. No longer. Defeated Louisiana Tech, Abilene Christian, Temple, Tulsa, UAB. They lost to Cal by 37. That was the opener. And North Texas at 5-7. Did stay within a touchdown of Tulane. They only lost to Memphis by 3. And only lost to UAB and Navy. They defeated UAB. They lost to Navy by a field goal. All right, San Diego State. What happened to the Aztecs this year? Not a good football team. Rallied a little bit at the end. They defeated Ohio to start the season. They played a week 0 game against the Bobcats. Good football team. Beat them by a touchdown. Beat Idaho State, Hawaii, and Fresno State. That was their last game of the season. So they finished on a high note. Had a rough non-conference schedule with Oregon State and UCLA and got blown out in those games. The Aztecs are 4-8, number 114. Then we've got Navy. The midshipmen had a chance to finish 500, but lost a close, excruciatingly tough game on the goal line to arch rival Army to finish 5-7. Navy beat Wagner, North Texas, Charlotte, UAB, and East Carolina. They lost that week 0 game to Notre Dame by 39. Lost to SMU by 45. Those were the down moments for Navy, our number 113 team. And again, the exercise today, where's Waldo? But it's more about ranking the teams, of course. All right, we come in with our first entry by the Power 5, and it's Cincinnati. Rough transition from the American Conference to the Big 12. And, of course, losing their head coach and a bunch of NFL players. So they beat Pitt, they beat Houston, and Eastern Kentucky. They lost to Miami of Ohio in overtime, and they had their smattering of games in regards to competitive one week, not competitive the next, lost by a field goal to Baylor, lost to UCF by 2, lost to BYU by 8, but Iowa State beat them by 20. Oklahoma State beat them by 32. West Virginia beat them by 21. Kansas beat them by 33. Cincinnati, 3-9. Yes, Scott Satterfield, get to work. At number 111, just one spot higher, would be the team that defeated Cincinnati by a field goal, Baylor. They beat Long Island. Okay, doesn't count, really. They beat UCF by 1. They were down by 4 touchdowns. To their credit, they came back, won the game in Orlando, and they beat Cincinnati by a field goal. That's it for Baylor this year. That's it. They lost to Texas by 32. Texas Tech 25. TCU beat them by 25. Kansas State beat them by 34. Ouch. Baylor. And somehow Dave Aranda kept his job. So this Baylor program has gone from a Sugar Bowl appearance and Big 12 championship to 6-7. Lost kind of an embarrassing bowl game to, it was the coldest bowl game of all time, the Frisco Bowl. Can't remember who beat them. Air Force. And then they plummet to 3-9. And man, they were awfully close to going 1-11. Vandy's at 2-10, 0-8, and they're number 110 in our rankings. They beat Hawaii and Alabama A&M. Did they play anybody tough in the SEC? No, they did not play anybody close. Really did not play anybody close in the SEC. Vandy was back to being Vandy. After some hope, the previous November, they won back-to-back games against Kentucky and Florida. But since then, back down the tubes. Clark Lee's promise of greatest program in America has some work to go. All right, let's keep it moving. We've got Ball State at 109. Beat Indiana State, Central Michigan, Northern Illinois, and Kent. Everybody beats Kent. They lost to Kentucky by 30 and Georgia by 42. So they racked up two big-time SEC opponents and got trashed. They did stay within a touchdown in conference to Miami of Ohio, Bowling Green, and Toledo. Ball State, 4-8 team, number 109. All right, at number 108, we've got Central Michigan with wins over New Hampshire, South Alabama, Eastern Michigan, Akron, and Northern Illinois. They took on Michigan State out of conference and Notre Dame and lost both of those games by 24 points. And really, other than the Ball State loss by 7, were defeated by 2, 3, 4 scores by everyone. Central Michigan, the first of the directional Michigan schools, comes in at 108. And of course, we will take your comments and questions and calls here as soon as we get through the list. At number 107, Western Michigan at 4-8. 3-5 in the conference. Their big non-conference game was against Iowa. They lost by 31. And Iowa doesn't beat anyone by 31 points, so that's not a good sign. They did stay within 13 points of Mississippi State, a bad Mississippi State team. And so Western Michigan comes in at 4-8, 3-5. And they, however, did defeat the two directional rivals, Central Michigan and Eastern Michigan. So give it up for Western Michigan. Tulsa's number 106 after a 4-8 season that included wins over Arkansas, Pine Bluff, Northern Illinois, Temple, and East Carolina. Now, let's give the Golden Hurricane a bit of a break. They scheduled Washington and Oklahoma back-to-back. They lost those games by a combined 82 points. They lost to SMU by 59. They're not a good football team, and they are number 106. Let's keep it going with the Blue Raiders of Middle Tennessee State. And they come in at 4-8 season, number 105 in our rankings. And where are they? I wonder if this is our miss. No, there they are. Murray State, Louisiana Tech, FIU, UTEP. Those are the wins. Their best game of the season, Middle Tennessee State, is they stayed within 4 points of Mizzou. They stayed within a touchdown of Liberty. So a couple nice efforts there, but Rick Stockstill and company could not win enough games to get to a bowl game. 4-8. Next up for the directional schools in Michigan, Eastern Michigan, number 104. So they stayed clumped up there together all pretty marginal teams, 4-8, 6-7, 4-8, 5-7. So there we've got Eastern Michigan lost their bowl game to South Alabama by 49 points. These wins are not impressive. UMass, Kent, Howard, Akron in overtime, Buffalo. So they beat an FCS team, and they beat 4 of our worst ranked teams in the country. But they eked out 6 wins to get to a bowl game. Minnesota was their big non-conference game. They lost by 19. Eastern Michigan. That's it for the directional Eastern, Western, Central Michigan schools. Up to 103. And Army, there they are, 6-6. They did defeat Texas San Antonio, and they defeated Air Force by 20. So those are the big wins. Obviously, their big win was Navy. That's the rivalry. But in terms of beating some pretty good teams, 2 nice wins. But man, they lost to UMass. They lost to Louisiana Monroe. LSU beat them 62-0. Army at 103. Let's move it on up to position 102. And there's Louisiana, 6-7, 3-5 in conference play. What stands out here? Well, they won the big rivalry game to end the season against Louisiana Monroe by 31. They lost 2 overtime games to Jacksonville State and Southern Miss. So that's tough. Otherwise, they might have had a nice little 8-5 season. But at 6-7, Louisiana is number 102. Moving on up to 101. At number 101, we've got Old Dominion. Old Dominion defeated somebody called Texas A&M Commerce 10-9. And man, they squeaked out some wins. Georgia State by 1, Georgia Southern by 3, Southern Miss by 4, and Texas Commerce by 1. But they got to 6 wins, got to a bowl game, lost to Western Kentucky in that bowl game. Of course, they blow a 28-0 lead. Otherwise, at 7-6 with a win over Western Kentucky, that probably would have bought them 5 spots or so. There you've got Old Dominion. They took on 2 ACC teams. They lost to Virginia Tech by 19, lost to Wake by 3. There you go. At the coveted number 100 spot, even 100, Georgia Southern, 6-7, lost the bowl game to App State by 28, beat the Citadel, UAB, Ball State, Central Connecticut, Louisiana Monroe, and Georgia State. A lot of bad football teams. So they beat the bad teams, and they were generally competitive outside of their bowl game. Oh, they lost to James Madison by 28. There you go. Georgia Southern, 101. Have we hit a winning football team yet? I do not believe so. We are about to. Marshall at 99. Marshall. They beat Albany, East Carolina, Virginia Tech. Nice win. Old Dominion, Georgia Southern, Arkansas State. So there we've got Marshall, the Thundering Herd. And I'm trying to think where their bowl game is. I know they lost by a couple touchdowns. They had oh my goodness, now I can't remember. I've just got a smattering of games, and I can't remember which one's their bowl game. I think I forgot to add it on. I know they lost by 2 touchdowns to somebody. They lost like 35-17. Why can't I figure out that team? 6-7 for Marshall. All right, then we got Georgia State. There's our first winning team. Georgia State at 7-6. Still looking for our missing team. Rhode Island, UConn, Charlotte, Central Connecticut, Marshall. That was the bowl game, I believe. Anyway, no, they play in the same conference. Beat Louisiana. And, man, they got blown out a lot. Georgia State did. A lot of blowout losses there. All right, let's move it on to Bowling Green. Bowling Green is at 97. They played a competitive bowl game against Minnesota. Only lost that game by 6. They only lost to Toledo by 1. Stayed within 10 points of Liberty. And maybe Bowling Green's greatest accomplishment and probably the biggest talking point for the Falcons this year is that they picked off J.J. McCarthy 3 times. That probably got them in more national conversations than anything. You know what? It did. That's what got them more conversation, more pub than anything, is in a 31-6 loss to Michigan, intercepting J.J. McCarthy 3 times. There's Bowling Green at 7-6. Fellow MAC member NIU at 7-6, number 96. They beat up on the bad teams in the MAC. They also beat Ohio. That's a nice win against the Bobcats. And really a non-distinct season. They did take the Rockets of Toledo within a 2-point game. So good effort there. All right, we delve back into the Power 5 for Stanford. Stanford at 3-9. They had the remarkable win against Colorado, one of the most fun games I remember watching last year because I believe we were doing a live stream. I got done with the live stream. Is that what happened? Yeah. I believe we did a live stream that overlapped the beginning of the game. I sat down and I thought, I'm going to watch some college football, Colorado, Stanford. And they're just getting completely annihilated. I don't remember what the score was. 33-3. They're losing by 30 some points. And I'm thinking, why am I watching this? And I'm just thinking, just keep watching. Oh, I know what happened. Got a phone call. I got a phone call. The phone call kept me on the phone like 45 minutes to start to see them come back. Otherwise, I don't know if I would have hung with this one, but watch to the end. Maybe the most fun college football experience of the year that I had was watching Stanford come back and win that game in Boulder in overtime. They lost to USC by 46. They lost to UCLA by 35. They lost to Oregon by 36. They lost to Oregon State by 45. This is one of the reasons. This is the reason they're this low at 3-9 as a Power 5. They had 5 teams just completely annihilate them. Good teams, but still. USC, Oregon, UCLA, Oregon State, and Notre Dame just crushed them. They had a nice effort against Washington. They were within 35-33 in the fourth quarter. But Stanford at number 95. At 94, we got Arizona State. And so Arizona State and Stanford did not play. Arizona State's biggest win by far, they had a nice little win against Washington State, who looked like they were going to be a good football team early in the year. They beat UCLA, the second to last game of the season. And they were competitive with Oklahoma State and USC and Cal and Washington. They played that game. That was one of the more talked about games in college football coming down the stretch because they hung with Washington. Probably should have won the game. But overall, bad football team. Of course, Ken Dillingham in his first season at 3-9. Stanford. No, there's. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. There we go. Pitt comes in at number 93. I thought I found my error. Pitt at number 93, 3-9. What can you say about this football team? This is one of the more disappointing efforts, one of the biggest just nosedives of the college football season. Pat Narduzzi is usually good for 8 or 9 wins. They won the ACC in 2021. They finished 9-4 in 2022 with a bowl win against UCLA. They were a preseason fringe top 25 team. They were supposed to be a really good team. Keaton Slovis at quarter. No, that was pre. This was the Phil Jurkovec year coming in from Boston College. And man, they beat Louisville. They even beat Boston College, a bowl team. But man, yeah, they lost to Wake. Wake's awful. Notre Dame beat them by 51. They generally went out and lost by 2 touchdowns every week. That's pretty much what they did. West Virginia 11, Cincinnati 6, North Carolina 17, Virginia Tech 17, Wake 4, Notre Dame 51, Florida State 17, Syracuse 15, Duke 11. So you could pretty much mark Pitt's going to go out and lose by 2 touchdowns. There you go. Pitt Panthers at a lowly 93. Who would have seen that coming? The Owls of Rice at number 92, 6-7. Beat Houston in overtime. That was their big win. That was their most impressive win by far. Beat a lot of bad teams. And they hung with Texas for a while. They only lost to arguably the 2 best teams, well, the 2 undefeated teams in American Conference play. Tulane by 2, SMU by 5. So that says something. Rice at 92. Change lists, Mark. Did I just have yeah. There we go. We pick it up at number 91 in Colorado State. When you go through the worst teams in America, some of them have one moment during the season where they either was just so incredibly bad or they did something incredibly stupid or they had a high point or something that put them on the national radar. I mentioned Bowling Green. Not a bad football team, but 7-6 and not getting much national attention, of course. But they had the Bowling Green actually beat Georgia Tech that turned out to be pretty highly seeded in the ACC, but it was the J.J. McCarthy game that put Bowling Green out there. For Stanford, it was the Colorado win. For Colorado State, it was the game against Colorado, Coach Prime. 5-7, could not get it done. That Colorado game would, of course, push them to bowl eligibility. They did beat Boise by 1. That was their best effort of the season in a winning game. And they generally just went out there and lost every week. Hardly anybody blew them out. Wazoo beat them by 26. Otherwise, they'd go out and lose by 2 touchdowns every week. Pretty much across the board. The Rams at 91. At number 90, we've got, I always love this. Love this. You would think this would be the last team in America that would play more games than everybody else. But they always do. They just always play more games. Almost always. Don't hold me to always. I'm speaking in generalities. Hawaii, they like to play 13 regular season games. I don't know. I'd have to dissect it and really go through it and look through the number of times that they've played. And then they made a conference championship game a few years ago. Therefore, they played 15 games. They're the only team in America at times, and we'll see another team that's going to pop up from the group of 5 that played 15 games. So they're the only team in America that is playing the same number of games as the national champion. I love it. It's just a statistical oddity that I enjoy. Hawaii had a 10-5 season a few years ago. Here they've got the 5-8 season where they did not get to a bowl game. And I don't know, I guess they would have gotten to a bowl game at 6-7. Would 6 wins is the criteria, but they would have been 6-7, not 6-6. So Hawaii 5-8, just like playing ball out there. Guess that's the deal. And they are number 90 in the country. At 89, we've got Butch Jones and Arkansas State. They beat a lot of bad teams. Except, listen to this. They beat one successful team. I'm not going to call them a really good team. Successful team, Texas State, 8-5 team. And when Arkansas State came to play, they beat Texas State by 46. They also lost to Oklahoma by 73. I don't know if there's another team in the country that has a 73-point loss and a 46-point win. They also lost to Memphis by 34 and Troy by 34. So when they ran into a really good football team, forget it. But the Arkansas State team did make a bowl game and finished at 6-7. Utah State, another 6-7 football team. They come in at number 88. They beat UConn by 1. They beat San Diego State in overtime. They beat New Mexico State in overtime. It was awfully close to being an awful season for them because they played a couple teams close. James Madison by 7. Fresno, they lost by 5. So we got Utah State coming in at 6-7. All right, next up, there we go. We've got our first entry from the Big Ten. We've got IU 3-9, 1-8, and Tom Allen, thanks for playing. See ya. Once this team only beat Akron in overtime, and only because Akron missed a field goal, I thought, forget it. Forget it. They did play a nice game against Louisville. If they would have punched it in, they were at the goal line. They lost by a touchdown to Louisville. Came within that close to tying the game. They lost to Illinois in overtime. They lost to Michigan State by 3. They lost the Old Oak and Bucket by 4. So, and they played a really good game against Penn State. I watched that game. I saw this team play quite a bit. I saw the Ohio State game. I saw most of the Michigan game. I saw the Penn State game. I guess that would be it. At number 87, the Hoosiers. All right, moving up to number 86 as we get close to midway point, Virginia, 3-9. Now, you talk about a team that is on the rise. At least they played a lot better. So they had the tragedy, of course, at the end of 2022, only played a 10-game season, 3-7, missed the last 2 games. So they hadn't played football for a long, long time when they stepped on the field against Tennessee and got blown out by 40, what was it, 49-13. But see, otherwise, they took James Madison within 1 point, NC State within 3, BC within 3, took Miami to overtime. I watched the Friday night game against Louisville. They had that game by 2 scores, blew it late. They played about 5 pretty good football teams right there. And then, of course, they beat North Carolina as a 24-point dog. So Virginia, yeah, they showed some fight, but they did finish 3-9. Number 85, we've got, if we would have said in September that this team's going to finish 4-8, although that was my preseason prediction, like many others. I think it was pretty easy to see. This was a 4-8 football team, up from 1-11, and had the rousing start against TCU, Nebraska, the Colorado State game. But after that, so we've talked enough Colorado like everyone else has. That's what it is. This is going to be an ever-changing situation. And, of course, they are tearing it up again in the transfer portal and in recruiting. So Deion Sanders is making moves, and we will see how that turns out. I got to think they will continue to improve as they move into the Big 12. At number 84, we've got Houston. Rough transition from the American, where they were successful. And, of course, this performance here, 2-7 in the Big 12, cost Dana Holgorsen his job. They had a Hail Mary against West Virginia, pulled out that game. I watched that. They lost to Rice. And on occasion, they looked pretty horrific. They lost to Texas Tech by 3 touchdowns. TCU beat them by 23. They lost to Kansas State by 41. And they won 2 conference games. They beat Baylor in overtime, and they won on a Hail Mary. So there's Houston football for you in 2023. 4-8 and number 84 in our rankings. Welcome in everyone to the Voice of College Football. What are we doing here? We are ranking all the teams 1 through 133. And there's a slight glitch in the rankings. I've missed a team somewhere. Even though I've spent way too much time on this and combed through this a million times. And I didn't think I missed a team because I doubled up on another team. So I had the number of, I went through the whole explanation to start. I won't do it now. At number 81, we've got Wake 4-8. They beat Vandy. They beat Pitt. This was just an awful team and an awful situation. Not that there's anything culturally wrong. I don't mean to paint it in that light, but man, just they played Clemson tough. They played Duke tough. And otherwise, they just went out there and lost by 15 or 20 points every week. Pretty much what they did. They beat Elon, Vandy, Old Dominion, and Pitt. And so the standards set by Dave Clawson not met this year, certainly with Sam Hartman and others departing the team. And he flat out stated at the end of the year, hey, I can make excuses, but we're 4-8. That's who we are. We got 4-8 coaches. I'm a 4-8 coach. We got a 4-8 team. There it is. At number 82, South Florida. Of course, their season ended with a resounding win against Syracuse, 45-0. And of course, earlier in the season, they had that much ballyhooed effort against Bama in a rainstorm in which it was 3-3 in the fourth quarter. And so that's another one of those examples of games that we were talking about earlier that stay with the national consciousness and stay as a storyline the entire season. One, South Florida, who's been horrendous. They've just been a pitiful program for quite some time now. And this was a bit of a comeback season for USF to go 7-6. They played that close game against Bama, and that was a talking point the rest of the season. So if you can do that, I guess at least people are talking about you in a periphery kind of way. South Florida at number 82. There we've got Arkansas as basically our first SEC representative outside of Vandy, because you have to make that distinction because Vandy's always last by a lot. So, man, Sam Pittman kept his job. He's still coaching, but he can't repeat that. This was awful. This team lost to BYU, who was not a good team. They lost to Auburn by 38, Missouri by 34. They only scored 3 points against Mississippi State. Their best game of the season was either going to Gainesville in the swamp and beating Florida in overtime, or they only lost to Ole Miss by a touchdown. Oh, they had that Bama game. That was a heck of a ball game, and they stayed in the game against Bama, actually made a bit of a comeback watch that game. I usually watch quite a bit of Arkansas football, but I only watched them play Bama almost start to finish. And since the Missouri games on Black Friday, I saw some of that, but I did not watch them play any other football that I can remember. Maybe a couple series against Texas A&M. KJ Jefferson's gone. Rocket Sanders is gone, but Sam Pittman's still there, and Arkansas is number 81. You know it's not good in Fayetteville when you're being outranked by South Alabama, 7-6. Of course, their claim was that early drubbing of Oklahoma State, who turned out to be a Big 12 championship caliber team. And South Alabama made it to a bowl game. And again, they finished at 7-6. Did they really win any other decent games? Not especially. They beat Southern Miss by 52 points. So there you go. You got South Alabama, pretty marginal football team, and that's why they're number 80. Now, this would be a bit of a typo. So Michigan fans, maybe I should clip this. Maybe I should I should do a false take, clip it, and then see everything go crazy. So as I was typing these at 3:00 in the morning, there you go. That's the result. That's what you got. Michigan, number 79. Absolutely. They were, and I basically evaluated them that they should have lost 8 games. They should have lost 8 games. No, that's Michigan State. There you go. 4-8, 2-7. Got to see the comments now coming in on this one. That must be yes, that is the Freudian slip of the hour. That, Tony, I don't believe I would ever do. Don't believe I would mix up teams like that. Don't think I would do that. All right. So back to the rankings. And yes, we will get it straight here. Who else did I screw up? Louisiana Tech. Yes, that was a bigger mistake, certainly, than this. Michigan State, whatever. Number 79, Michigan State. That didn't change. I changed it. There we go. Michigan State. They beat Nebraska and Indiana. They played Iowa tough. They played Rutgers tough. They should have won that game. They played Minnesota tough. How much Michigan State did I watch this year? Well, the Penn State game was just a complete joke to end the season. I saw bits and pieces against Nebraska. I saw probably a half plus against Ohio State. I saw bits and pieces against Minnesota, bits and pieces against Michigan. The Iowa game was a good game. Caught some of that. Most of that, if I recall. So, Jonathan Smith, there you go. Work with that. Bring in Aiden Childs. Work with that. Get it done. Michigan State's got to be better. Number 79. All right. We got the Golden Bears at number 78. They blew a game against Auburn. They missed 2 or 3 field goals in that game, lost 14-10. They, of course, had USC on the ropes and went for a 2-point conversion at the end, lost 50-49. They lost to Oregon by 44, but pretty much anybody in the bottom half of the Pac-12 lost to Oregon by 44. They beat North Texas, Idaho, Arizona State, Washington State, Stanford, and they finished off the regular season with a inexplicable win against UCLA, 33-7, before they got blown out by Texas Tech in the bowl game. I think Cal football, now they're moving to the ACC. We'll see what impact that has on the program, but they're okay with Justin Wilcox and him winning 30-some% of his games in the well, it's going to be the ACC in the Pac-12. Because even though this, 6-6 mark, what's so wrong about that? They go to a bowl game. No, his conference record is atrocious. 4-5 was a really good year for them in conference. And I think I added that up incorrectly, actually. They lost to Auburn, and they lost their bowl game. So they went 3-6 in the Pac-12. All right. Enough on Cal. Just they need to figure out whether they want to win anything in football or just they'll take the TV check, I guess. Western Kentucky, number 77. They defeated nobody decent. Nobody. Beat a lot of bad football teams. Lost to Ohio State by 53. And again, that's another Power 5, Group of 5 distinction point right there. That shows you a lot right there. Lost to Liberty by 13. Non-distinct season for Western Kentucky. The Hilltoppers have done much better in the past. They finished 8-5. Jacksonville State at number 76. Kudos and congratulations to Rich Rodriguez. First year in the FBS. They go 9-4, 6-2 in the Sun Belt. Look at that. or in Conference USA. Decent wins. They beat Western Kentucky. And then they had the bowl game against Louisiana. That was a fun one. I watched that game. They won on a 4th down conversion, walk-off field goal in overtime. Nice little storyline there for Rich Rod and Jacksonville State. The Gamecocks go 9-4. They're number 76. Who would have thought? Jacksonville State, 76. Nice job. And let's go down the right way. Texas State at 75 beat Baylor. That's the best team they beat. No, they beat South Alabama. They lost to Arkansas State by 46. We noted that earlier as one of the aberrations in college football this year. And they played well against Texas San Antonio, lost by a touchdown. Texas State, 8-5 this year at number 75. Then we go to App State. App State, of course, one of the great group of 5 programs. This is not one of their better seasons, but still, they went 9-5, went to the conference championship game. Their best win was probably, well, they beat James Madison. So they hung that first loss on JMU is what they did by a field goal. And that's a nice win against Miami of Ohio in the bowl game in a rainstorm. So App State finishes at 9-5, number 74. And again, one of the great group of 5 programs. 73, Coastal Carolina. Speaking of tremendous group of 5 programs, but that was built by Jamie Chadwell. And of course, he's gone. But they still turned in a solid season. They went out to the Rose Bowl and lost to UCLA to start the season by a couple touchdowns. Otherwise, they were a pretty nondescript team. They pretty much just, they did have a 42-point loss to James Madison. And they beat Duquesne by 59. Otherwise, okay, they beat Marshall by 28. Their other 9 games were all roughly within 10 points. 10, 4, 8, 10, 13, 10, 7. A lot of close games for Coastal Carolina. They won most of them, finished 8-5. At number 72, we got the final season out of Dino Babers. I was waiting for this to happen at some point. Seems like a nice man, good football coach, but just not getting the job done at Syracuse. They had one pop-up season in 2018, 10-3. 6-2 in the conference, but otherwise, yeah, other than the scare of Clemson about every season, was accomplishing nothing. Always just crash landed seasons. Would start 4-0, 5-0, 6-1. This Syracuse team played a soft non-conference schedule, build up its record, and then there you see 2-6 in the ACC. They beat Pitt. I'm not finding their other ACC win. Shoot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Pitt and shoot. I don't have it in front of me. I don't know why I messed that up. I could probably figure it out. They probably beat Wake or Virginia. Anyway, Syracuse won 6-7. They lost their bowl game by 45, but new coach, interim coach, didn't coach. Yeah. And they lost a couple close games. Georgia Tech beat them by 9, BC by 7. They also just got humiliated at times. North Carolina beat them by 33, Florida State 38, Virginia Tech 28, and then that South Florida bowl game by 45. Enough on Syracuse. They start a new era at number 72. BYU at number 71. So they had their issues transitioning into the Big 12 as well. With 2 wins in the conference. They beat Texas Tech and Cincinnati. On occasion, they would get just drubbed. So their high point on the season was probably that game against Oklahoma. They had a shootout against the Sooners at home. They stayed within a touchdown, close game. TCU beat them by 33, Texas by 29, West Virginia by 30, Iowa State by 32. BYU's got some work to do. Kalani Sitake, get to work. You did a nice job when you were some kind of weird mix between Power 5 and Group of 5. Now you are a Power 5. And this season showed that you played a Power 5 schedule and you were not up to the challenge. So BYU at number 71. All right, number 70 may lose its coach here in any hour. Brent Brennan has posted back-to-back 7-5 regular seasons, and he may be off to Arizona to replace Jed Fish. That's what we are hearing. Their best wins, UNLV. They won that game. They beat Fresno State. They beat San Diego State, who's usually good, not this year. They beat Utah State, a bowl team. They stepped out of conference early in the season and really couldn't compete with USC or Oregon State. They got blasted twice. They stayed within 4 points of a good Toledo team. So San Jose State, decent Mountain West team, played well in conference. There you see it 6-2. And actually almost made the conference championship game, tied for the best record in the conference, but were ousted by a tiebreaker to get to the conference championship game. But again, they might be starting over minus Brent Brennan. All right, back into the Big 12 and TCU at 5-7. 5-7, national championship game, 5-7. That doesn't happen very often. They beat BYU by 33 points, Baylor by 25, Houston by 23. They beat SMU by 17, who was, of course, the American Conference champion. They had really losing to Oklahoma by 24. Pretty understandable. That was the last game of the season. They put up 45 points on the Sooners, but they gave up 69. They lost a couple close games to Colorado. Of course, that was the season opener when that was a big deal. TCU and Colorado playing on Fox, big noon. Lost to West Virginia by 3, Texas Tech by 7, Texas by 3. They played that great game late in the season against the Longhorns. Only lost 29-26. So TCU, they will be back. They will be better. Sonny Dykes, we'll see if he's a one-hit wonder. I seem to believe that he is to that extent. I think that's pretty obvious to see. But TCU should be back in that 8-win category. At number 68, we've got Washington State. Wazoo took a nosedive. I've been impressed with Jake Dickert from the time that he took over the program in 2020 amidst COVID issues. Nick Rolovich, the previous coach, fired because of not adhering to COVID protocol. And half the coaching staff left in the middle of the season. And Jake Dickert basically had a bye week. And he was a new defensive coordinator. It wasn't like he was with the program for 10 years. And he got them to a bowl game. And did a fine job last season, going 7-5 back to a bowl game. They did lose to Fresno State and got off to a nice start. They had wins against Wisconsin, Oregon State. Once they beat Oregon State, I thought, they must be pretty good. No. Then it all spiraled out of control from there. They lost to Arizona 44-6. And just a slew of pretty close losses, other than the Oregon game, which they actually played a great first half against the Ducks. They lost a lot of close games. Some bad teams, though, beat them. Stanford, Arizona State, Cal. So Washington State takes a tumble to number 68. If I would have had time, or would have taken the time, I would have gone back to last year's. Maybe I'll do this at a later date. I'd be curious to see what the rankings were last year and compare and post last year's rankings and see the rise and the fall. At number 67, we've got UCF. Interesting non-conference schedule with Boise State, Villanova, and Kent. Okay, they beat Boise State up on the blue turf by 2. They had that odd game against Oklahoma State where the Cowboys were coming off the big win against Oklahoma in Bedlam, went to Orlando and got waxed by 42. They had the odd loss against Baylor where they were up by 4 touchdowns and lost to a bad team. They played some pretty close games here. They went to OU, took them within a 2-point conversion. The Baylor lost by 1, lost to Texas Tech by 1, led their bowl game 14-0 in the first quarter, and it looked like Georgia Tech couldn't stop them, and they suddenly could not move the football and were blown out from that point on to fall to 6-7. Gus Malzahn, much like your other counterparts who have just joined the Big 12, you got work to do after going 3-6 and finishing at 67 in our rankings. Back to the Big 10, Illinois pulled off a win in week 1 against Toledo. They needed to convert a long 4th down play and kick the long game-winning field goal as a walk-off to beat the Rockets. They also had this dramatic game against Minnesota where their backup quarterback, oh, shoot, why can't I remember his name? John, I want to say Stafford. It's not Stafford, something close to that. Shoot, I've said it about 52 times this year, but I cannot remember it right now. Anyway, the backup quarterback comes in for Luke Altmaier and completes like a 4th and 18 pass. 3 plays, 75-yard touchdown in the final 45 seconds. They beat Minnesota by 1. They won a dramatic game against Indiana in overtime. They beat Maryland by 3. They beat FAU, who sucks. They beat them by 6. They barely beat Toledo. I just outlined that. They were pretty close to just having a disastrous year. Brett Bielema, nice breakout the previous year at 8-4, got to a nice bowl game, but lost all that NFL talent. And he's got a big challenge ahead of him to stay competitive in the Big Ten. And Illinois is number 66. All the Huskers, they had their shot down the stretch a number of times to get to bowl play. Lost to Wisconsin in overtime. Blew a game against Michigan State, who had not won a Big Ten game in forever. Lost to Iowa in the final game of the season by 3. Lost to Maryland by 3, throwing an interception in the end zone. So they had numerous opportunities to get to 6 wins. Could not get it done. But I do believe that Matt Rule is the right guy for the job. Nebraska at number 65. We are about halfway home. Man, woo! Let's see what you guys are talking about in the chat because I need a bit of a break or something. John Paddock. What'd I say? Stafford. No, it wasn't Stafford, but John Paddock. Thank you. John Paddock. Couldn't come up with his name. Tony believes that Nebraska is going to go bowling next year. I would tend to think the same. However, with the beefed up schedule, and we always think Nebraska is going to go bowling next year. We've got a 1984 Holiday Bowl sighting from Gregory and John. Yes, BYU, Michigan. What are you folks talking about? Kyle McCord for Heisman. Okay. We do have a super chat coming in. Appreciate this coming in from Badger and Bournemouth fan. Here is for doing this on a Tuesday morning while it's 11 below outside. Absolutely. So we're not going outside today. Not going to do that. We're just going to read off a bunch of football scores and make rankings. And again, I've botched the rankings, folks. If you're just joining us, and we've got an enormous crowd here of, I think I'm seeing the wrong number. I think it says 3,700. You ever make a list? I do this every time I make lists that are like massive lists. If it's a list of 8 or 12, I can handle that. believe it or not. But a list of 133, this happens just about every time. Okay, I've gone through every team, gone through the standard, and I got 132, or I got 131, or I got 134. So I know something's wrong. I know I've misnumbered, or I got a team in there twice, or I'm missing a team. So then I went through, made a bunch of fixes, figured out, oh, I got that team twice, or there's a misnumbering on of course, I don't number them personally, but the application numbers them, but something happened where it doubled up a number or something, or skipped a number. So I comb through all that, get it all worked out. One time I was missing, I don't know, I'll make up a team, Louisiana Tech. Oh, forgot them. Let's plug them in. Where do they belong? That happened a few times. Happened a few times where, oh, it's repeating 64. And so forth and so on. So I get it where I've accounted for everyone. And I start going through and I'm making all the graphics. And I did about half of them last night. And I did about half the banners this morning right before we came on. So, of course, it couldn't have been an error at the beginning. But I get to about 30 something and I've got Duke twice. So I placed Duke where I want them. But I'm like, that means I'm missing someone. Who are they? I doubt they're a Power 5. There's somebody in the crevice of Conference USA or somewhere. And I went through and I even went through all the standards. Anyway, there it is. I'm missing somebody. So somebody's not ranked. And somebody is going to comment to this video, whether it be now or 3 days from now. Somebody's going to find it. Somebody's going to let me know who we missed. Yes. Who we missed. And it's probably a bad football team because they're forgettable, number one. Number two, because I used this list doing my top 25 that actually makes sense throughout the season. So by the end of the season, as you can imagine, like even Wake was on that list because when they were 3-0 or 2-0, I was considering them for the top 25. So I had this out to like 70 teams by the end of the season. So it's got to be a bad football team. So maybe it won't get caught because nobody's going to care to find it. We just left off with the Huskers. So we are now up to number 64 in South Carolina. South Carolina had a bad season, coming off 8-4, went to the Gator Bowl, lost to Notre Dame in a really exciting game. Shane Rattler was back. Spencer Rattler, Shane Beamer was back. John Paddock, John Stanford, South Carolina. So, man, they beat Mississippi State. They beat Vandy, Kentucky. That was their best win. They beat Kentucky by 3. That's the only decent football team they beat. They were just bad from the get-go. From that opener against North Carolina where they got sacked about 48 times. Bad offense. Just a bad football team, and they got a lot to fix. I thought that they would be slightly better. I probably picked them 7-5. I'd have to go back and look. But Shane Beamer is going to have to show that he's up to the challenge. He looked like a great hire, got off to a good start, takes a step back at 5-7. All right, another 5-7 regular season team. They got a shot to play in the postseason. Minnesota, of course, had that academic standing that allowed them to be the 5-7 team to play in a bowl game. And they won the bowl game over Bowling Green by 6. So that got them to 6-7. And PJ Fleck is now, 6-0 in bowl games? 2017, 18, 19, didn't go in 20, 21, 22, 20, 6-0. They beat Iowa They were somewhat gifted, a win against Iowa. Won't go through that whole debacle with the blown call. They lost to Northwestern. When they lost to Northwestern, they came out and they beat a couple bad teams, including Nebraska. Then they lost to Northwestern. I saw them play North Carolina. They lost eventually by 18, but it was pretty competitive into the fourth quarter. Then once they lost to Northwestern, now lo and behold, Northwestern turned out to be better than Minnesota. But at the time, I thought, wow, they had Northwestern down by 3 touchdowns, and Minnesota has, under PJ Fleck, had a really good defense. They gave up a 24 spot in the fourth quarter against Northwestern. They're bad, and they proved to be bad over and over and over. They got drubbed by Purdue, and they gave up that miracle series of plays that I talked about against Illinois, and Michigan, of course, killed them. So, yeah, Minnesota, this was PJ Fleck's worst team, but they get the bowl win. They finished 6-7. Oh, Billy Napier still has a job, I think, because he recruits. So the powers that be are going to continue to give him, or at least this one last time, going to give him a shot. But coming off 6-7, 5-7, and man, that schedule next year is brutal. Toughest schedule in college football. Gators had the one shining moment against Tennessee. Ball's pretty good team, come to the swamp, and Florida lays them out. Other than that, man, they got just beat up by Kentucky. Ray Davis is still just knocking guys down. Of course, Georgia clubbed them. They lost to a bad Arkansas team at home. They played Missouri close, only lost by 2. They played Florida State respectable. It's Florida. They've got talent. They've got top 15 to 20 talent in the country, but Billy Napier hasn't gotten it together. Graham Mertz actually had a good season, but their defense is atrocious, and they've made changes there to try to correct that. All right, number 61 is Mississippi State. It's another team that's taken a tumble. Of course, rest in peace to Mike Leach. He had them at 9-4 the year before. Zach Arnett, their defensive coordinator, gets promoted, is only allowed to coach, 11 games? He gets fired, and they finish out their season. Now they bring in Jeff Levy from Oklahoma. Big offensive mind. We'll see what he has in store. They do lose their quarterback, Will Rogers. This is not a preview of 2024, but that's where I'm at. Yeah, they just couldn't compete in the SEC. They won one conference game. They beat Arkansas 7-3. Mississippi State at 61. Did beat Arizona. Controversial game and call at the end, but they beat Arizona. Auburn, year number 1 under Hugh Freeze, finished out to be a 6-7 team after they got blasted by Maryland in the whatever bowl that was. Was that the Music City? What was that? No. Whatever bowl game that was. Was that the Duke's Mayo? No, that was not the Duke's Mayo. Music City. Whatever bowl game they played Maryland. I used to be so good with the bowl games. Now I can't keep track of them. So Peyton Thorne was not the answer at quarterback, certainly. This was one of the worst passing offenses in college football. They beat about 4 kind of bad teams. Arkansas, Mississippi State, Cal. Those were their best wins. Of course, they could have beat Bama. That would have made the season. If they could just have lined up a picket fence of defenders at the goal line and stop that play on 4th and 31. But they did not. And Georgia or Florida State or somebody else is pissed off because they did not make the college football playoff because of Auburn's shoddy defense and just shoddy defensive game planning. But number 60 in the country. So Hugh Freeze, get to work. At number 59, we've got the Bobcats. They finished 10-3. They had a nice season. including big wins in the conference against a bunch of bad teams in the conference besides Bowling Green. They started off the year with a loss to San Diego State, but they won their bowl game and they finished at 10-3. So the Bobcats are number 59. Then we've got New Mexico State checking in at number 58. And that's the team I was talking about that played 15 games. New Mexico State. Love this. 10-5. Just can't get enough of playing ball. Just could not get enough. They made the conference championship game. They lost to Liberty by a couple touchdowns. And of course, the unfortunate thing here is that they found their guy, their program builder, a guy that probably would have stayed, had health concerns before, more health concerns, and wasn't at a place in his career where you thought he was trying to go back up the ladder. Former Minnesota coach Jerry Kill, outstanding job at New Mexico State, but he steps away and they are starting over. Our number 58 team, New Mexico State, with the dubious 10-5 record. At 57, we've got the Red Hawks of Miami. They won the conference championship game. They also, again, another indication of the separation between the group of five and the Power Five. Here's a really good group of five team. And they lost a close bowl game to App State. And they had a nice season. Good team. They lost to Miami of Florida by 35 points, by 5 touchdowns. So one of the best teams in the MAC, Miami at 57. All right, there's Toledo at 56. Toledo, my goodness, they barely lost to Illinois. And that record should be 11-3. They lost the MAC championship game to Miami. They lost to Illinois on a walk-off field goal. They lost a lead in the fourth quarter against Wyoming in the Barstool Sports whatever bowl, Arizona Bowl. Toledo was close to going undefeated. Couldn't quite get it done, and they are number 56 and finished again undefeated in the MAC, but lost the conference championship game. At number 55, Jeff Traylor, always rumored to go elsewhere, but he continued to win games at Texas San Antonio. They finished at 9-4. In their first year in the American Conference, they acquitted themselves extremely well. They did lose to Houston, Army, Tennessee, and Tulane. Nothing too egregious about that. Their best win was probably against, I don't know that they really beat a decent team. Texas State, they went 8-5. That was their best win. Beat a lot of bad football teams to finish 9-4, 7-1 in conference play. Boston College had a bounce back year under Jeff Hafley. He was on the hot seat. He has momentarily saved his job with a 7-6 season that included a bit of a surprising bowl win against undermanned SMU. They did lose to Northern Illinois, and Holy Cross took them to a 24-21 game. So this was no juggernaut here. They beat Army by 3, Virginia by 3, UConn by 7, Syracuse by 7. They walked the high wire. BC, though, won the games to finish at 7-6, number 54 in our rankings. Texas Tech was, by many, a wild card choice to make it to the Big 12 championship game. They did not. They still finished over 500 overall. And in the conference, they had a big victory over Cal in the bowl game to finish over 500. Beat Cal 34-14. Decent wins against Houston, Baylor, TCU, Kansas. That was the big win of the season, although Kansas was playing with its third-string quarterback. They lost to Wyoming in overtime, played a really good game against Oregon. Their best effort of the season was taking Oregon to the wire in Lubbock. So consider that. Oregon's one of the best teams in the country. Texas Tech could have easily won that game. They are number 53. And there's the team that defeated them in non-conference play, the Cowboys of Wyoming in Craig Bowles' final season, they go 9-4. They win the bowl game 16-15 over Toledo. That's a nice win. They beat App State, Texas Tech, Toledo. So a slew of nice wins. Really they lost to Boise State by 25 points. Otherwise, they played close games. And the Cowboys are number 52. At number 51, we stay in the Mountain West with UNLV. So you had UNLV, Wyoming, Fresno State, Air Force, Boise State, San Jose State, all bunched up at the top of the Mid-Mountain West Conference. And for the Runnin' Rebs under Barry Odom, they had some decent wins against Wyoming, Air Force. Those were two nice wins for them as they made it to the, I believe, finished 9-5. There we go. They went to the conference championship game, lost to Boise State. So a solid showing at number 51 out of the Runnin' Rebs. Next up, we stay in the Mountain West with Fresno State. The Bulldogs had some disappointing efforts at times. Lost to San Jose State by 24. They lost to New Mexico and a bad San Diego State team to conclude the regular season, but then they bounced back and won the bowl game to finish at 9-4 and had an out-of-conference win, 2 out-of-conference wins that are pretty impressive against Purdue and Arizona State. 2 bad Power 5 teams, but still Power 5 wins for Fresno State and our even number 50 team at 9-4. Let's keep it rolling. Number 49's Air Force. The Falcons look like they might be the group of 5 rep in the New Year's Six when they started 8-0. Then they crashed with 4 consecutive, sorry for the pun there, crashed with 4 consecutive losses before winning the bowl game. And so Air Force with a nice bowl win against a strong James Madison team. And they also notched wins against San Diego State, San Jose State. And they also defeated Wyoming. Lost the matchup against Boise State. And so Air Force finishes at 9-4 at number 49. And there is the aforementioned Broncos of Boise State. Despite the 6 losses, they rallied. They won the Mountain West Conference. So they are the champions of all these glut of Mountain West teams up near the top of that conference. You got to rank them number 1 because they won the conference. Just have to. Plus, they played difficult non-conference games against UCLA and Washington. So Boise State goes out there and schedules. The UCLA game was a bowl game, but they go out there, they schedule UCF, they schedule Washington. And so they schedule tougher than their competition typically in the Mountain West. And they won the conference championship despite losing and firing their head coach, Andy Avalos, after a 5-5 start. So credit to the Broncos and their amazing program at number 48. Number 47, we've got the Hokies of Virginia Tech. Brent Pry doing a nice job bouncing back Virginia Tech from a 3-win season to 7-6, plus a bowl win over a Tulane team missing its starting quarterback, Michael Pratt, but still a 21-point win in the bowl game against Tulane capped this one off. And Virginia Tech, man, you can put half the ACC in a bucket and you don't know who's going to win games. If Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech, it would have been Louisville before this year, Boston College, Pitt, Syracuse. If they're playing each other, who knows what's going to happen? And this is reflected in they beat Pitt, they beat Wake, they beat Syracuse, they beat Boston College, they beat Virginia, and they beat some of these teams they beat them by a lot. Beat Virginia by 38, BC by 26, Syracuse by 28, Wake by 17, Pitt by 17. Lost to Purdue, lost to Rutgers, so 0-2 against the Big Ten. Hung with NC State, hung with Florida State for a half, got just trucked by Louisville, still had a chance to get to the conference championship game with 2 weeks left. But Brent Pry, Virginia Tech, there's hope. at number 47. Checking in at number 46 is another bounce back story in Iowa State, coming off a 3-9 season the year before, just one win in conference play. Of course, Matt Campbell, one of the hot commodities in college football a few years ago. Their losses, aside from just getting trucked by Oklahoma, their losses are respectable. Lost to Iowa by a touchdown. Lost to Ohio. That's not the best, losing to a group of five, but a good group of five. Lose that game by a field goal. Lost to Kansas by a touchdown. Texas by 10 points. Lost the bowl game by 10 points to Memphis. Beat BYU, Kansas State. There's the win of the year right there. They beat Kansas State and Oklahoma State. So Iowa State, when they put it together, those are two nice wins. Beat the team that made the Big 12 championship game in Oklahoma State. Iowa State finished at 7-6. They are number 46. At number 45, with Jimbo Fisher, no longer with Jimbo Fisher. Now Mike Elko leads the Texas A&M Aggies. Another disappointing season. That's why Jimbo is taking a bank vault out of College Station with him. They lost to Miami in non-conference play by 15, and then it just downhill from there. Any decent efforts? Well, Jimbo's last game, they beat Mississippi State by 41. But man, Auburn, there's the best team they beat. They beat Auburn by 17. The rest of their wins, not impressive. They lost close games, so nobody's blowing this team out. For as much as they've underachieved, they took Bama to a tight game by 6, Tennessee by 7, Ole Miss, we know how good the Rebels finished. That was a 3-point loss on the road. I watched that game. I watched the Bama game. Lost to LSU by 12. Lost the bowl game with a third-string quarterback playing, and they were missing like 31 players. And only lost to Oklahoma State by 8. At number 45, still with a slew of talent. And Mike Elko now, look out, Texas A&M. At number 44, the team that defeated Texas A&M at Hard Rock Stadium, Miami. Miami went 3-5 in the ACC against, they only beat Virginia in overtime, Clemson in overtime, BC by 25. If you would have told anyone before the season started, Miami is going to defeat Clemson and Texas A&M, seemingly the two best teams outside of Florida State on its schedule, well, this is a big comeback season for Mario Cristobal. No. They had the kneeling debacle against Georgia Tech, of course. And they just would go out and find a way to lose. Nobody beat them by much. Lost to North Carolina by 10, NC State by 14, Florida State by a touchdown, Louisville by a touchdown, Rutgers by a touchdown. That's Miami football for you. The Canes at 7-6 are number 44 in our rankings. And dubiously, Georgia Tech's number 43. So if Miami kneels, you don't know how the bowl structure would have changed, but they probably would have gone and lost another bowl game. But they would have finished 8-5 and probably 10 spots higher in our rankings. Georgia Tech, if Miami would have knelt, they would have missed a bowl game. They would not have finished 6-6. They would have finished 5-7. This Georgia Tech team, therefore, they would not have had the opportunity to beat UCF. They would have lost a bowl game and finished 5-7. But here we are. Got to rank them the way the results indicate. Only lost to Louisville by 5. Gave Ole Miss a decent game, but got blown out in the fourth quarter. They did lose to Bowling Green. They lost to BC by 15. They got blown out by Clemson. They gave Georgia a good game. They went 5-3 in the conference. So I think this is a house of cards kind of situation. I know that Jeff Collins' replacement, Brent Key, offensive line coach, done a nice job, done a really good job. Was emotional after the bowl win against UCF. They were down by 14. They won by 17. Came back, won by 13. Outscored UCF by 30-3 to close out that game. So he held it together, doing a great job. But that 7-6 is mighty shaky. Next on the list, we got Rutgers. Graciano. Here's another guy who knows how to coach. That's all there is to it. Outside the conference, they beat Miami, Virginia Tech. Their best effort in conference play was probably for 3 quarters against Ohio State. They beat Michigan State. They beat Indiana and Northwestern. Well, Northwestern ended up being good. I love this program. I love they just bring they bring the hammer. They are the hammer to your nail as much as they possibly can be. They know who they are, what they want to do. Ball control, play defense. And I don't know that they can improve much more, especially in the new Big Ten. But they finished off with a bowl win at 7-6, number 42. This Wisconsin team, this is a disappointing year for Luke Fickell, but of course, he's just getting started. And it closed rather well. Started okay. They did go on the road and lose at Pullman. But I expected more. Most people expected more. The offense didn't quite work. Tanner Mordecai got hurt. They finished, though, with overtime win against Nebraska, beat Minnesota, and played a heck of a game against LSU in the bowl game and lost 35-31. That was a great game. They had a 2-touchdown lead in the fourth quarter and blew it. Otherwise, they would be ranked much higher. They played Ohio State tough. They played Iowa tough. But 7-6 with their schedule and with their performance is going to leave you right there at number 41. Just ahead of the Badgers is Kentucky. 7-6. Lost their bowl game against Clemson. One of the more entertaining bowl games of the year. No doubt. Got blasted by Georgia and Bama, of course. Pretty much controlled and handled by Mizzou. Close game against Tennessee. Close game against South Carolina. They lost to South Carolina. That's a bad loss. Best wins, Florida. And that game against Louisville. That really saved their season. And so Kentucky's at number 40. And they kept their coach, who was headed off to Texas A&M at one point, but Mark Stoops staying in Lexington. At number 39, we go back to the group of 5 and one of the final entries out of the group of 5. Troy, the Trojans, go 11-3. Won the Sun Belt. They had 1-9 conference matchup against the Power 5. That was against Kansas State. They got whipped by 29. They lost to Duke in the bowl game. So Troy's at 11-3, and they are number 39. At number 38, we got one of the more talked about new teams, of course. James Madison, 11-2, went on that great early run and almost played their way into a New Year's Six. Of course, there was a controversy about whether they were going to be allowed to play a bowl game because the rules prohibited it, it being their first season. Lost to App State in overtime, lost to Air Force by 10. That's it. Congratulations, James Madison. Great way to start. You lost your coach, though, and you're number 38. We've got Memphis at 37. Tigers, a tough team, finished off with a win against Iowa State in the bowl game. Memphis also, they beat Boise State. They beat North Texas. They beat Iowa State. They beat Navy. They only lost to Missouri by a touchdown. They only lost to Tulane by 10, and they only lost to SMU by 4. Good football team. Ryan Silverfield is probably headed to a Power 5 job at some point, and Memphis is 37. I am not going to do the Liberty jingle. Not this time. I am not going to do it. Finished 13-1. Yes, You may think that's rather low, but they did not beat anyone, and they did not belong on the field against Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl. But great job by Jamie Chadwell, 13-1. They get to a Fiesta Bowl game, regardless of whether it was earned or right. Heck of a job by him. And we got Liberty at 36. We've got Tulane at 35. Of course, they won the American Conference the year before. They went undefeated in conference play this past year. They were set to go back-to-back, but could not complete the deal against SMU in the conference championship game. They lose Willie Fritz, but they went 11-3. And again, the focus on 2023 here in the rankings, number 35 for the Green Wave. At number 34, we've got, this might be my issue. It's supposed to be. I should have known it involved Duke. Trying to outsmart me. So I'd still be missing. I'm still missing somebody somewhere. So shoot. For as many years as I've done this, can't believe I screwed this one up this time. But man, you pour over this stuff for like 5 hours and it's like, okay, I'm done. So what are we going to do with Duke? What should we do with Duke? Put him down at 133? Let's make it easy. Put him down at the end. Because what I was wrestling with here is that Duke finished 8-5. Duke finished 8-5, and they had the really nice win against Clemson to open the season by 3 touchdowns. They beat Northwestern by 34. And basically, you add up all the performances, the really good game against Notre Dame. They played well against Florida State. That I was going to place them and had placed them at 34, one spot behind North Carolina. They lost to North Carolina in overtime, but you can't honor head-to-head. It's impossible. I do it as much as possible, but you can't do it because there are too many games against each other. So I was going to actually put Duke I was going to raise them and violate my final top 25 that actually makes sense and put them ahead of Northwestern, who they beat by 34 points. I said, I got to honor this 34-point win or 24-point win against Northwestern by Duke. But maybe we'll just stay with our rankings here. We'll just stay with what I originally have because I don't want to violate our top 25 that actually makes sense. So despite the big win against Northwestern, we can go with the philosophy of there's progression throughout the season. Of course, that was week 2. So Duke, Manny Diaz taking over from Mike Elko, who did a remarkable job, and Duke's at 34. North Carolina at 33. This is starting to become rather disappointing, what Mac Brown's doing in North Carolina. At first, it was wow. He lifted them from the doldrums, and there seems to be this thought every year that they're going to break through. Drake May, well, he's wasted his time with Drake May. They turned in another disappointing season at 8-5. And my goodness, it just has not been a breakthrough spot for this program. They ended up not beating really a good football team outside of Duke in overtime. Miami lost the bowl game, lost to Virginia, lost to Georgia Tech, got pretty much manhandled against Clemson and North Carolina State. I think North Carolina's at the crossroads to a certain extent at 33. Number 32, we got SMU. They won the American Conference. I believe that they should have been playing in the Fiesta Bowl. They lost 2 games against Power 5 teams. Liberty did not play any Power 5 teams. Therefore, SMU had the same record against the group of 5 as Liberty did, but they also played in a much better conference. So SMU should have been in the New Year's Six. They are the American Conference champions. They lost a bowl game to Boston College. Rhett Lashley doing a heck of a job. At number 31, we got Joey Foster's West Virginia Mountaineers. Great bounce back season by Neil Brown, of course. Bowl win to finish at 9-4 after a 5-7 2022. When you add it all up, I'm not going to say I'm overly impressed. They did miss Texas on the schedule and Kansas State. So that was fortunate. They did just blast BYU and Cincinnati. They lost to Oklahoma State by a couple touchdowns. They lost to Penn State by 3 scores. They lost to Oklahoma by a zillion. So 3 of their 4 losses, no issue in regards to who they lost to. They lost to a team that went to the conference championship game. They lost to an Oklahoma team that went 10-3. They lost to Penn State, who was a top 10 team all year. Who'd they beat? Best win, besides North Carolina in the bowl game, which, again, I hate to look at these bowl games this way, but how do you really evaluate the bowl wins? Most of them are just tarnished now, unfortunately. They beat Texas Tech by 10. That's got to be their best win this season. Beat up on a lot of bad teams in the Big 12, but hey, they won the football games, and Neil Brown is thankful for that. So at number 31, we got West Virginia. Still trying to rack my brain to figure out who we are missing. At number 30, we got USC at 8-5. Of course, disappointing season under Lincoln Riley. They're making all sorts of massive defensive changes. And please check out our Trojan Conquest live show every Monday. We just posted another one last night with Matt Zemek and Tim Prangley. USC shot off to a 5 or 6-0 start. They ended well with the win against Louisville, but once they hit the good teams in the Pac-12, they just couldn't keep up. Although some of those games were close, it was a shootout against Washington, excruciatingly close loss against Utah, triple overtime win against Arizona turned out to be a really good win. So USC, they now move to the Big Ten, but their performance in Caleb Williams' swan song in LA is good for number 30 in our rankings. At number 29, the team that just pummeled USC in their rivalry game, UCLA. Strange season for the Bruins. Did not play anybody non-conference, so they skated by with 3 easy wins. Coastal Carolina, decent team. Then they suffered some really horrific losses. Of course, they couldn't figure out their quarterback situation. They wanted to play the true freshman Dante Moore. He certainly was not up to the challenge. Beat a couple good teams in USC and Washington State, and then had the bowl win against Boise State. That was impressive. And then just generally couldn't beat any other good teams. They lost to Arizona, Oregon State, Utah, and then they lost to 2 bad teams in the Pac-12 championship, in the Pac-12 end of the season. Chip Kelly, you're moving to the Big Ten, and you will have to get better. UCLA's at number 29. At 28, we've got Mike Locksley and his Maryland Terps. 3 consecutive bowl wins. How about that? They did still finish 4-5 in the Big Ten, still lost to everybody that they typically lose to every year. Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. Also lost to Northwestern, which at the time looked really ugly. Turned out to be a better loss than what we had hoped for at the time. They beat Rutgers. They beat Rutgers and Auburn. Those were the 2 best wins. So this is a marginal football team that, man, they challenged Ohio State in the first half. They challenged Michigan for the entire game. They can show up. There's work to be done, but Mike Locksley continues to recruit well, And if they can hang on to him, maybe they got a chance to do something in the new Big Ten. So that's Maryland at 28, Utah at 27. The Utes have, man, who am I missing? Good Lord, because we're going to have a snag in our top 25 now. I'm going to have to go back to my original top 25. Maybe that's what I need to do. Yeah, I'm going to check that out. I think that could be the issue. Utah 27. Kyle Whittingham, not one of his best teams, but they had just a mess at quarterback because of injuries. Cam Rising never made it back. And Utah still a fine football team at 8-5, head off to the Big 12. And lost to Northwestern by a touchdown in the bowl game. Got blasted by Oregon. So did everyone else. Best wins, USC, UCLA. Got to credit Utah for scheduling Baylor and Florida non-conference. Good for them. At number 26, we've got Oregon State. The tiebreaker here was they beat Utah head-to-head. So I went with Oregon State over Utah. And it would have been nice to have seen Oregon State, a full Oregon State team, play a full Notre Dame team in the Sun Bowl. That would have been a really good game. That would have been one of the best games of the bowl season. Fully staffed Oregon State, fully stocked Notre Dame. But we did not get to see it. So they lose by 32 points to Notre Dame. You got to count it. So that's what it is at number 26. Now to our top 25 that actually makes sense. And what I'm going to do here as you marinate on this Northwestern season, because that's remarkable that they finished number 25. Or even if you don't believe that they should be 25, they're definitely in the top 30 to 35. And for Northwestern to have pulled that off is pretty freaking incredible. I am going to, I believe, be able to figure out our issue by going to our top 25 that actually makes sense. Our final edition here, I think. Because I think I just screwed up by displacing number 24. We'll see. Maybe not. Oh, no. Okay. Well, that doesn't answer my question. That does not fix it. That actually, so I screwed up when I went through this. I did have Duke at 24 for a reason. Yeah. I did have Duke at 24 for a reason, and I had them in my top 25. That actually makes sense. So we're going to keep Duke at 24 instead of what the other number was. All right. So I have no idea who we missed, but we got Duke at 24. And then the rest is our top 25 that actually makes sense. So I'm not going to go into any kind of ultra explanation here. We'll run them down as we send out the link for any calls. If anybody has any comments, questions, anything concerning college football, doesn't have to be about this. There you go. All right. So we'll run through the top 25. We dropped the link in the chat if you want to give us a call. Iowa 23, Kansas 22, Kansas State number 21, Oklahoma State 20, Clemson's at 19, NC State at 18, Tennessee at 17. At 16 is Notre Dame. 15 is Louisville. 14, Oklahoma State. And number 13 is LSU. Number 12 is Arizona. Penn State at 11. Ohio State at 10. Missouri's 9. Ole Miss at 8. Oregon 7. Florida State 6. Georgia's at 5. Alabama 4. Texas 3. Washington 1. or Washington 2. And at number 1, we've got the national champions. So to go through this, what we did not explain, we'll start with Notre Dame at 16. Irish with a decent season, lost to Ohio State at the wire, lost to Clemson, got controlled in that game, didn't look good against Louisville. Best wins, well, the Oregon State game would have been, but that's compromised by all the opt-outs. Nice win against USC by 28, beat Duke, beat NC State. NC State, Duke, USC. Those are the 3 big Notre Dame wins, 10-3. At 15, we got Louisville. So their best wins, they beat some bowl teams, North Carolina State, BC, Georgia Tech, had the big night against Notre Dame at home. They did defeat Duke by 23 points against the backup quarterback, beat Virginia Tech by 31. So they beat a lot of bowl teams, but just bowl teams. Miami beat them by a touchdown on the road. Had that inexplicably bad game against Pitt. You see, they only lost 1 game in the ACC. That was to Pitt, but they lost the championship game. They lost the final game to Kentucky. They finished weak. Lost the bowl game to USC with getting completely shredded by Miller Moss with really no impactful defensive opt-outs in that game. So Louisville finished weak. Jeff Brom, though, great start. Top 15 team, made it to the conference title game. Oklahoma, comeback year for Brent Venables in his second year, coming back from 6-7 to 10-3. Had the huge win against Texas. Big win against Iowa State by 30. Blasted West Virginia. Narrow wins against marginal teams UCF and BYU. Lost to Kansas. Kansas, good football team, but still upset on the road against Kansas. Lost Bedlam by 3. And then the bowl game, again, didn't have Dylan Gabriel, did not have a ton of players. Have to take it for what it's worth. Entertaining game against the Wildcats in the Alamo Bowl with their future quarterback, Jackson Dart, playing that game. Jackson Arnold playing that game. I get those names confused all the time. Jackson Arnold playing that game. And he will be the Sooners starting quarterback in 2024. LSU at 13. Crushed Auburn. And man, they beat Texas A&M and Wisconsin. Those are the 3. Oh, they beat Missouri. That's right. Beat Missouri. How much LSU football did I watch this year? I saw very little of the Missouri game. I watched the bowl game. Man, I saw them less than I usually do. I saw some of the Ole Miss game. I saw the Florida State game, of course. That was a national standalone game on Labor Day night. And I watched the Alabama game. LSU, Jaden Daniels, gone. Garrett Nussmeier, probably the starting quarterback in 2024. LSU, 10-3, number 13 in our rankings. Arizona, number 12. And now, well, I'm still mystified here. Arizona at number 12. No Jed Fish. So he leaves. You would say in the past in this kind of situation that the previous head coach left the program in a good position, but with the transfer portal, all those guys could just be gone. And many of them will be, I would think. He's going to pluck some up to Seattle. Others will scatter. So Jed Fish, a nice one-year wonder at Arizona, could have been the beginning of something great with the Wildcats. And most likely the next coach is going to be San Jose State's Brent Brennan. At number 11, we got Penn State. Same old, same old. Lost to Ohio State and Michigan. Finished 10-2. Now it's on to the new era of the Big Ten, and James Franklin will be called upon to figure it out against top 10 teams, against the best teams in the conference. We'll not have to see Ohio State this year. 10-3. The bowl game performance, they lost to Ole Miss. It's difficult to really evaluate. Number 10 is Ohio State. I believe the Buckeyes are a better team than this, but the results show us 11-2 because they got to be ranked behind Missouri. And Ole Miss has certainly finished strong, better conference. So the Buckeyes at 11-2, 8-1. Of course, they or Alabama, probably slightly Alabama, gave Michigan the national champion its toughest game. So there are the Buckeyes at number 10. Missouri at 9, won the Cotton Bowl. Eli Drinkwitz, going into this season, had a sub 500 record at Mizzou. So big season for him. Now he seems to have it rolling. He's got his quarterback coming back, Brady Cook. They had a really good defense. Luther Burden, one of the best wide receivers in the SEC. So Mizzou, they played Georgia tough. They lost a 10-point game to LSU at home, but it was a 3-point game, and then they had a pick six to end it. So really close game against LSU. Played Georgia tough, beat Tennessee, blasted Tennessee by 4 touchdowns. Beat Florida, Kentucky, Ohio State, of course. So Mizzou at 9. Ole Miss capped off its best season in quite some time. 11-2. I think Hugh Freeze's best team went 10-3 a couple times when they won the Peach Bowl and won the Sugar Bowl. But Ole Miss gets the Peach Bowl win, defeat Penn State, only lose to Alabama by a couple touchdowns, and they got blasted by Georgia. But beat LSU, beat everybody else in the SEC West, got a win against Georgia Tech out of conference, Penn State. Really good football team here. Ole Miss stocking up in the transfer portal at number 8. Final rankings for 2023, folks. Oregon, number 7. If it just weren't for the Washington Huskies, man, Oregon right there, 12-2. Lost those 2 3-point games. If they could have won one of those games, especially the Pac-12 championship game, of course, they would have been in the playoff. Bo Nix had a remarkable year. They played a scrimmage game in the bowl game against Liberty. Oregon, what could have been? Florida State at number 6. Talk about what could have been. Jordan Travis laying on the field against North Alabama, the second to last game of the season. That gave the playoff committee an excuse, although under their criteria, a valid excuse to harshly reprimand and evaluate the Florida and Louisville wins where the offense looked awful. And so Florida State left out of the playoff. And then the bowl game, that is the pinnacle, the classic example of what this bowl system has become. It was a joke. It was just laughable. It was just Kirby Smart said after the game, this is not what we want. This has to get fixed. We played a good football team, but they weren't there. we could have played a good team, but they didn't have their guys. So even Kirby Smart said, and did not even get questioned about it. Not directly. Reporters insinuated that it was a bit of a farce. But Kirby Smart kind of stopped the news conference and said, I got to say one other thing. So Florida State, unfortunately, not given the opportunity to play for a championship, and they finished at number 6 because you got to place Georgia ahead of them. They got the same record, and Georgia won the game slightly, just by a little bit. Georgia, I said it with Oregon, for this particular season, what might have been for Georgia had they been able to get into the playoff. They lost to Bama by 3. I've detailed reasons why I think that the game was a little bit more significant, or a little bit more, the loss was more confirmed than just a 3-point loss. Bama was the better team on that night, but Georgia wraps up the program's on a roll. This is the best program in college football, but they finished number 5 as a team in 2023. At number 4, Bama, for obvious reasons. Don't think I have to justify the rest of it. There is a case to put Georgia somewhere in the top 4. But if they did not rightfully make the top 4 and then they won this bowl game against a bunch of second and third stringers from Florida State, I don't really justify lifting Georgia into this top 4, especially since the games were competitive. Texas, Washington, great game. Michigan, Bama, obviously an epic game. And then the national championship game, Michigan was clearly the better team, but Washington had its shots. They had about 3 or 4 instances when they were within a touchdown, which was most of the second half, where they could have broken through and made it a game. But they did not. Michigan, clearly the better team, more dominant team, and worthy of a national championship. The only 15-0 team in college football, just the 4th in history. Yes. Clemson 2018. LSU 2020, Georgia 2022, and Michigan 2023. There's our 1 through 133, minus somebody out there. And we appreciate y'all being here at the Voice of College Football. I did drop the link in the chat if anybody wants to jump on. If not, we are good to go. And just wanted to display these fine rankings for you folks. And we will see you soon. We've got a full day here at the Voice of College Football. We got the Iowa show coming up here at 5:30 Eastern. We got Nebraska at 7. We've got Michigan at 8 Eastern. We've got the Oregon Ducks live show at 10:30 Eastern. Those all on their respective team channels. Amazon links in the description section of all the videos. So please use that. We are trying to help this poor, struggling Amazon company. And if you own a business or are heavily involved in a business, I think we could do some great things for you. We could partner with you and deliver the audience that you're looking for. So hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. All right, folks, appreciate you being here. We will see you at 5:30 Eastern over on the Iowa channel for Hawkeyes Live. And if something hits me throughout the day, we will certainly get to more content. So who knows what's going to happen between now and then. I can only imagine that we will have more transfer news, more coaching news. Arizona looking to wrap it up with Brent Brennan. So we shall see you soon. Of us are on the internet pretty much all the time. It's fun. You get to socialize, you get entertained, and in this day and age, it's pretty much necessary. And even if you're one of those people that's not on the internet all the time, you know what is? Your personal information. And there are people out there trying to hack you all the time. They want your email address, they want your phone number, they want your place of employment, and they want to do bad things with it. There's also fairly legitimate corporations and companies that want your information. They want it for marketing purposes. They're going to buy it. They're going to sell it. They're going to trade it. At the very least, it's annoying to you. It's a nuisance. It's aggravating. Your email gets cluttered up with spam email. You get robocalls all the time. That's at the very least. At the worst, it's a threat to your family, to your friends, to your personal information, to your banking, to your finances, to your security, to your safety, to your identity. It can be pretty serious. This video is sponsored by Aura. I got hacked and it was pretty obvious. This was about 8 or 9 months ago, and there were red flags all over the place. And I didn't exactly know what to do, but I knew I needed to do something quickly. I mean quickly. I researched 8, 10, or 12 companies immediately. I went all over the place. I asked people. I was online looking for the best company that could serve my needs and secure my information. You know who I found? Aura. And I'm glad I did. It was amazing. I contacted them. They got right back to me immediately. Their customer support is phenomenal. Their customer service is first-rate, friendly. They are detailed. They know what they're doing, and they do it right, and they will protect you. In addition to everything I just mentioned, they've got a password keeping service. They keep your credit score. They notify you anytime there's a possible data breach. This has happened to me a number of times. I'm getting notifications all the time when there's a possible compromise to my credit score or anything that I don't want. They've got a VPN that will allow you to browse the internet anonymously. It's amazing. And again, customer service support available 24/7. Click the link in the description section below and get 2 free weeks of Aura. Protect your finances, protect your information, protect your privacy, protect your identity. I did, and I'm glad I did. Aura, thank you so much for what you've done for me, and now for my Voice of College Football community. Folks, I apologize because I did post the link. I don't know why it didn't take. So I had copied and pasted it and posted it like I always do with the please join the show. So that didn't take for some reason, but there it is. So we will do a going once, going twice, going 3 times kind of deal. And again, the missing team out there is, I got to say, for business reasons, I'm not going to spend more than like 13 seconds trying to figure out who it is. So I apologize for the one missing team, and we'll get ourselves back ready to roll here with some lights on. All right. Going once, going twice, going 3 times. If you're just joining us, then go back, check out the rankings. And yes, they are off by 1. I apologize. So appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. And we will see you. We got Hawkeyes live at 5:30 Eastern, folks. See you then.